Within hours of my ex-husband leaving, I had a sense that something might be wrong with our financial picture. And so I took out the computer and I attempted to log into our joint checking and savings accounts. And I say attempted because I soon learned that he had changed the passwords without my knowledge. I was able to get in. One of the benefits of being together since we were teenagers is I could answer all of his security questions. I knew his mother's maiden name and name of his first dog. Once I got in, I almost wished I hadn't been successful. The checking account had mere dollars in it. The savings account was negative. There was a credit card that was maxed out that I didn't even know about. And that was only the beginning. I soon learned that since he had access to the credit cards in my name, the credit cards that I wasn't using and so never thought to check the balance on, well, those were maxed out as well. Altogether, I was looking at over $50,000 of debt in my name. Debt that I wasn't responsible for creating, yet debt that I was going to have to clean up. And I can't even begin to tell you how utterly devastating that was, how embarrassing it was, how shameful it was. I've always prided myself on being practical with money, being good with money. By nature, I'm a saver, not a spender. And all of a sudden, I was looking at these numbers that didn't even register in my mind. At first, I thought I was going to have to file for bankruptcy. It seemed like the only option. And so I called a bankruptcy counselor, and that phone call was one of the most difficult in my life. After I gave her the basics of the story and we ran through the numbers, she started chiding me for my actions, wondering why I was buying vegetables. I just remember almost laughing. It was like, lady, kale is not the reason that I have $50,000 of debt on my cards. No, that debt was because my husband at the time was courting his other wife. It's because he was drinking all day instead of working. That's what put me in debt. Not my choices, not my actions. And that's the brutal truth of financial betrayal, is that it's real. And yet those on the outside don't seem to understand. I kept thinking when I was talking to that bankruptcy counselor on the phone, if I had bruises, would she have blamed me? No. But instead, I had red lines on my account, and somehow that was supposed to be my fault. And of course, part of the problem with financial betrayal is that you do feel culpable. You do feel like a fool. When I look back, could I have been more careful? Absolutely. Did I trust too much without verification? You bet. But that's not an excuse for somebody to take advantage of that. That is abuse, pure and simple. Regardless of its form, abuse basically comes down to two things: control and manipulation. And both of those can certainly be done with finances. When it comes to financial abuse, it can either be overt or covert. Overt abuse is obviously easier to spot. Those are the situations where one partner doesn't have access to the marital funds or is put on some sort of a strict allowance. It's when one person is always made to feel badly whenever they make purchases, even very reasonable ones, and the other one is allowed to spend freely. Covert abuse is much harder to see. That could be in the form of hidden assets or hidden debts. Covert abuse is more normally what's not said, as opposed to what is. It's hidden, and that's what makes it so hard to see. When I first discovered all of the financial abuse, marital fraud, as I like to call it, I actually had some hope in the legal system. I thought surely this must be illegal. After all, he was using credit lines in my name. He used one of my paychecks to buy the other woman's wedding ring. That can't be okay, right? Wrong. What I was told time and time again by police and attorneys was this: it's not fraud if you're married. Like somehow just because there's that legal document that gives the other person every right to use you however they want. Sadly, that's how the law sees it. There is one area where I did receive some legal relief, and surprisingly enough, that was through the IRS. They have a program called Innocent Spouse Relief, and if you suspect that your ex or current partner has perhaps committed some tax fraud and you're not culpable, it might be something to look into. And of course, financial abuse is about so much more than just money, because money is about so much more than money. It's used to kind of as a shorthand for our trustworthiness. I remember being so shocked as my car insurance went up since my credit score had dropped. I remember applying for jobs and learning that they would do a background check on me, including looking at my credit score, and being horrified that they saw me as somehow less than and not worthy of their company. And that's true, right? I mean, we see money as sort of a sign of your social worth, your value. And here I was with less than nothing. And I felt like less than nothing. It was like this scarlet badge that I felt like I had to wear. And it kept coming up because I kept being put into situations where I had to explain what had happened. And I saw those disbelieving looks of either you're lying or you foolish woman, how could you have let him do that to you? You know, it's been over 10 years now since all this happened, and it's been about 5 years since I paid off all the debt. But the impact, it's still there. I still have guilt every time I go to spend money on myself. I hear his voice in my mind saying, you just always have to have everything, don't you? You always need the latest and the greatest. Which wasn't true. But I still struggle to believe that. When I finally bought a new car a few years ago, it was a strange mix of pride and elation that I got to a point where I could purchase my own new car. And at the same time, I felt like I shouldn't be spending that money. Like somehow I needed to continue to save every penny that I could in order to refute his claims about me. Even with some of that lasting damage, you can recover from financial betrayal. Of course, it's going to take time. You know, there's no quick fix to it. And I know for me, a lot of the emotional healing really couldn't happen until after I had resolved the debt. Because while that was there, well, it was on the forefront of my mind. as you can imagine. It's important to try to find some trusted allies. For me, one of those was my dad. When all of this happened, I was too afraid to look at my credit score. It literally paralyzed me to think about it. And so I gave him access to it. And I told him not to tell me the number. But what I asked him to do is tell me the improvements. And in fact, it was years. It was probably about 3 years before I finally gathered up the nerve to look at my credit score myself. And at that point, it was bad, but it also felt doable. And those trusted allies can really help you in the beginning when it's just too overwhelming and it just makes you sick to completely face it alone. If, like me, you are faced with a long road of rebuilding your financial health, it's important to prioritize. You cannot do all of it at once. So figure out what's most important. And you need to look at this from both a financial standpoint and also an emotional standpoint. Because in this case, they both matter. Ultimately, you have to face this. I know it's hard, but facing it is the only way to make it go away. It's also important to learn how to protect yourself from financial betrayal and fraud going forward. One of the first things is to improve your own relationship with money. If you have guilt or avoidance sort of tendencies with money, you need to address those. Because otherwise, you're making it easier for somebody to take advantage of you. I recommend making sure that you have money that only you have access to or that the other person doesn't have easy access to. And then check those accounts frequently. Check them both to make sure that the balances are what you expect, and also check them to make sure that you still have access, that passwords have not been changed. Sign up for a credit monitoring service, and you may even want to consider putting fraud alerts on your accounts. That was something that I definitely had to do while the divorce was ongoing, because I certainly didn't trust him to stay out of my accounts then. Pay attention to any discrepancies between income and lifestyle. Now, in my case, there weren't any. My ex was very good at keeping all of that hidden. But often there might be some discrepancies that you see. So pay attention, because that might be telling you something. Look for gaslighting or projection. Often those that are engaged in financial betrayal will accuse you of being careless with money or misusing funds somehow. And finally, if you generally have avoidant tendencies, either towards money or towards difficult conversations, be extra cautious, because unfortunately, you're at a higher risk. Financial betrayal and abuse is real. You were not a fool to end up in this situation. You trusted. And unfortunately, somebody chose to take advantage of that trust. Now that you know, it's time for you to face this, to do everything you can to fix it, and then learn from it. I know right now it feels like you're in this impossible hole that you're never going to be able to get out of. But there is life on the other side. They took your money. They didn't take away you.